Building in a Small Town, where we're talking to entrepreneurs, community leaders, policymakers, and more to find out how they're building things in small towns. I'm your host, Shelby Smith. Today I am joined with Meagan of Blue Moon Holistic, Blue Moon Properties, Blue Moon, all sorts of things.
Yes, right. Hi, thank you. So good to be here, Shelby. Yeah, so we have Blue Moon Holistic Wellness, and we do have another company, Blue Moon Properties. So
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
I thought there was a Blue Moon theme through it all, so I knew it was not just Blue Moon Holistic Wellness.
Correct.
There was an also property angle to it. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining me today. I'm excited to learn about all of the different adventures that it sounds like you have going on. So why don't you start with, did you grow up, you guys are based in Nevada now. You live in Nevada with your family as well, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, but did you grow up in Nevada? Are you from Central Iowa?
Yeah, so we have lived in Nevada, my husband and our 5 little humans, since 2012. And I originally was born in Belmont, Iowa, which is a little town about 60 miles north of Ames. And we moved to Ames when I was 1. And I lived in Ames all throughout high school, and then graduated high school and kind of went here and there, always stayed in Iowa, and then met my husband. We lived in Gilbert for a little bit, and then finally landed in Nevada. That's where we've been ever since.
Ames High, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yes, I know. It's on the gym wall. Had a lot of games against Ames. So is your husband from Ames as well then?
He actually is from the Zering area. So
okay.
He went to Colonesco High School.
Gotcha. So you guys are Central
yeah.
Iowa, born and raised kind of thing. So when you graduated high school, did you go to college? Or?
I did. So I actually played volleyball, collegiate level, at Ellsworth Community College. So I don't even know what class that is. Like not.
I think that's junior college.
Yeah,
is what
definitely not like 1A or anything like that.
2-year.
Correct. Yes.
Junior college. JUCO.
Yep, that's right. And really at that time, college just seemed like the next step after high school. And so that's just what you did. And I found out really quickly that it just didn't really feel authentic to me and my experience. I had so much fun playing volleyball, but that was really about it. The schoolwork piece of it was not really something I was interested in at that time in my life. So went to Ellsworth Community College, stayed there a year, and then I just decided I was not investing my money wisely. And so actually left college, traveled down, lived in southern Iowa for a few years, and then came back to Ames.
Where did you live in southern Iowa?
Literally probably like 10 miles from the Missouri border. So if you're familiar with Graceland College, down in Lamoni, it was Decatur County, Iowa.
Okay.
Yeah. The poorest county in the state of Iowa.
What in the world took you there?
Just met some friends, and it was like either go there or go move back home, and I just was really kind of a little bit of a gypsy at heart and decided to see where the journey took me, and that's where I ended up for a few years.
And what did you do in Decatur County?
So I got a job at the hospital. I worked first as, I think I interviewed for a CNA position because I had gotten that in high school. Found out that I was actually really good at that healthcare aspect. It was something that came super easy to me, and in high school I didn't really apply myself with the studies. And so I was enamored by the fact that something came so easy to me. So I got the CNA, and I originally think that's what I applied for many moons ago at Decatur County Hospital. But I actually got hired as a physical therapy assistant. So worked in their physical therapy department, and it was like just a lovely little work family.
Yeah. Huh. So you did that for a few years, and then you moved back up.
Yep.
To Ames?
Moved back to Ames.
Why?
Just felt like it was time intuitively, like my time down in southern Iowa was done. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
just needed more.
Right.
I was ready to grow and come back home.
Okay.
With my family.
Yeah. And so then did you stay in the hospital setting? Like, did you come back to Ames and work in Mary Greeley or McFarland?
Yeah,
or?
so no, I actually worked for a Rolling Green Village when I was looking for jobs. And back then, this is going to date me, but they actually still put ads in the newspaper for help wanted, right? We didn't have the LinkedIn like we do now. We didn't have anything like that. So I was looking in the paper and there was a sign-on bonus for this particular nursing home. And I thought that sounded like a pretty cool gig. So went where the money took me, got that job, got my sign-on bonus, and ultimately that's how I found my husband, was through another friend that worked there. It's just kind of like, the stars aligned. And so looking back, that journey that probably made no sense to others that were on the outside looking in, like it was totally, it ended up exactly how it was meant to be.
Yeah. So tell me, what was it like working in a retirement home? Like, what did you do? Like, what were you doing daily?
Yeah, so it's really hard work. So as a CNA in a long-term care facility, you are helping individuals, usually at the end of their life, with their activities of daily living. So everything that we do when we wake up in the morning, as we age out, it gets harder and harder. So really taking care of another human from the time they wake up to the time they go to bed.
Yeah.
So everything in between.
Yeah, literally everything that goes with it. Did you enjoy it?
I did, yes.
Yeah.
I really, I think there is something incredibly rewarding about having the honor of taking care of somebody, a soul, a human that has lived as long as they have, with that experience and that knowledge. It just really, I felt like it was an honor. I did.
That's awesome. Yeah. So you were there, how long were you there?
Oh,
Do
who
you remember?
knows?
A couple years?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, really, I can tell you, so you know how like everyone talks about the COVID, that's when COVID happened, right? Like we have certain inflection points in our life that we kind of, it was back when this happened. So during that time when I was at long-term care, I, like I had said, met my husband, and we, shortly after we had met, it was just fate. We knew that, the stars had aligned, right? And so I was still at Rolling Green Village when we had our first daughter. So that was back in 2009-ish. So I was probably at Rolling Green for like 2.5 years.
Okay. So you meet your husband.
Yeah.
Inflection point, obviously.
Yeah.
You have your first daughter.
Yeah.
Then what? So then at that point,
I was like, I have to get my shit together. Like now it's time to, if not for me, I have to get all of the important adult stuff together for our daughter. So I went back to school. Actually found out that I was really smart, like wildly intelligent. Graduated with a 4.0. I went back for nursing at DMAC in Boone. We had another little girl, Olivia. She came about 14 months after our oldest, Lily.
Irish twins.
Yeah, yes. I got a few in the family. So then graduated with my nursing degree, I think around 2009. And then I already messed up on the dates.
That's okay.
Lily was born in 2007, so many moons ago, as I'm now playing this out in my head. But I did graduate with my nursing in 2009. So then it was time to get a big girl job, and so I did. My first job as a nurse was as a health coach for Story County Medical Center. We were the first health coach in Story County. Back before health coaches were so mainstream and kind of like saturated. Now there's a health coach everywhere. And I Loved that job. I was specific. I really niched down at the hospital for diabetes. So I saw patients who had chronic medical conditions, but the one that I was tracking data on was for diabetes. Grew the health coach program, and then it's a critical access hospital. When you're good, you kind of just get more added to your plate. And so I kind of climbed the success ladder, if you will, there in various different roles at the hospital.
Yeah, and
a
then,
decade.
And then at that point, then you just kind of felt like you had grown out of it, or I think you brought another human into the world sometime.
Yeah, so sometime in that, on that journey, we brought our third daughter, Finley, who's now 11. She joined us. And when I left Story Medical, I was the director of acute and skilled, as well as health promotions, which included like community, corporate, employee wellness, plus cardiac rehab. And I was overseeing interim the ED. So I had a lot of humans underneath of me. Several of them were 24/7 departments. And it just was like, I got to the point where I'm like, I don't know how I got here, but this isn't serving me. This isn't serving my family. So I was actively looking for something that would align with the illusion, because I really think this work-life balance thing is just kind of like a teeter-totter, right?
Yeah.
It's a journey. You've never fully arrived. So I was looking for something that would help give me the ability to be more present at home. And I was reached out by a past coworker who had left. She was at United Healthcare, and she had a supervisor role for me. And she assured me that it was Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, low stress. And I'm like, I'll take it. And so that began my time at United Healthcare. I loved it there. Was there for, I'm gonna say like almost 3 years, working for a company such as UHG. It's an enterprise really. And so I learned a lot, cared for some really complex humans in their home. It was quite fulfilling. But then again, it was just kind of got to the point where that was actually right before COVID. So that was about 2019-ish. And I was traveling a lot.
I was going to say, was it in fact 9 to 5 or 8 to 5?
Yeah, no, so again, when you're good, right, you get more added. And if you've ever worked for, or if you know people who have worked for like United Healthcare or any of the larger enterprises, there's always restructuring that happens. In the corporate world, we call it right sizing. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of right sizing that happened. So it wasn't the same job when I left as when I started, and I didn't feel like I was making the impact that I needed for it to be nourishing. The corporate ladder is like they call it the golden handcuffs. For a reason. You make really good money, you work really hard, but I was traveling quite a bit, which I loved until I didn't, right? There was one day I had came home and vividly remember just sitting and like looking at my 3 girls, and I'm like, they're not babies anymore. Like, how did this happen? And so I don't know, it just kind of intuitively, my heart was changing, and I didn't want to climb that corporate ladder. I didn't want to be in that kind of environment any longer. So I always had holistic wellness kind of in my back pocket. I had gotten really sick in 2010 and spent a week in the hospital, and I mean, it was just like this whole ordeal. And
are you comfortable sharing what happened?
Yeah, so yeah, definitely, because I think that this really kind of like is another inflection point in my journey. So one day, it was a Sunday in September, and my husband and I, this is when we lived in Gilbert, we were walking the girls. We had Lily and Olivia at that time, and we were just walking around town, and I was just not feeling super great that whole day. Just kind of like, when you start to feel like there's a bug, you're getting a bug, or kind of that achy feeling. And I'm like, but we went on a walk. It was a beautiful sunny day, and I lost vision. like the vision in my right eye started to go a little wonky. And I was like, well, that's really strange. And I was wearing glasses. So I'm like, Andrew, is there's something on my glasses? And he's like, no. And you kind of have that like rush of panic, like, oh my gosh, I can't see his face out of my right side. It was just that central pinpoint vision. And then I checked my temp and I had like 102 temp. And I'm like, well, this is really strange. So I went to the ER and they're like, we don't know what's going on. It's probably stress. So I left and I was on steroids. So they put me on steroids. Well, actually I left the ER because I was fine, discharged fine, just with stress. But then the next day I woke up and the vision, like I couldn't really see anything out of my right eye. So I went into the eye doctor and my eye doctor was like, we need to get you to Wolf Eye Clinic. So long story long, this could be a podcast in and of itself. I got my first taste of really, and I was a nurse at this point, but I got my first hand experience as far as like what it's like to be in the medical system without any answers. I think most of us, we take our good health for granted, and we just have this notion that if we get sick, we go to the doctor and they make it better and we go home. And that was not my experience at all. I ended up actually in Methodist for over a week. I was ultimately discharged with like the precursor to multiple sclerosis, so MS. I had some lesions on my brain and on my spine, but non-specific, meaning they couldn't diagnose me with MS because there's like, flow chart you have to, yes. Yeah. And with any autoimmune disorder to get diagnosed usually takes anywhere from like 5, 7, 10 years just because of the nature of the beast. So when I had left the hospital with, several specialists, neurology, rheumatology, because no one really knew what was occurring. They knew something was going on, but it was just like kind of one of those, we have no idea. And so I played the game, advocated for myself significantly. That is when I really learned the importance of advocating for yourself. And the last time I had gone to see one of my specialty doctors, he's like, let's try this medicine. And I couldn't even tell you now what the name of it was. He said it's new, but I think it'll help your symptoms, but you probably won't be able to have kids anymore.
So at this point though, so you leave the hospital after a week, right?
Yeah.
And all of these tests, all these things, do you have vision back in your eye?
So and I left out, like, long story long, this probably went on for a good 2 to 3 weeks. So I left, they gave me steroids, vision came back.
Okay.
So I was on a steroid taper for, I think it was 7 days. When I came off of the steroid taper, I lost vision in both eyes and my fever came back. And that's ultimately how I ended up in Methodist for over a week. And
so at that point, they don't know what's causing the fever.
Right.
Have they found the lesions on your brain and your spinal cord yet?
Yep, that didn't happen until I was in the hospital. So when I was in the hospital, and Methodist is a school, like it's a school, right? And so I thought I was getting really good care because I had so many doctors. And really looking back, I was just a guinea pig. Yeah. It was a great learning opportunity, I guess is a more positive way to frame that. So I did have several MRIs, spinal taps. I mean, it was crazy what I had kind of gone through.
Okay, so you get through all of that. They still have no idea, but they hand you a whole bunch of specialists essentially and say, whatever symptoms come up, like this is the specialist you'll go to for said symptom.
Correct.
So you end up with this particular specialist that says, I think I have a drug for you. Yeah. It's experimental. There's a few side effects. Like, then what?
One of them, like, you probably won't be able to have kids. And at that point, we just had Lily and Olivia. And I was like, no, thank you. So I left and I never went back. And I was like, there has to be a better fucking way to do this. Like, this is insane. And really that is, I think had I not gone through all of that, I wouldn't be where I'm at today with the knowledge that I have. I learned so much through that experience. I just, they always say like moms are the best unpaid detectives ever, right? Because mom can like find anything out on Google. I really feel like the knowledge that I, learned throughout that whole experience was probably like 4 or 5 years worth.
So in all of those
Yeah.
different doctors that you said, and I think I already know the answer to this, but did any of them ask about like, what's your diet like what's your work environment like what's your stress level, like any of those things that like I don't know if everybody knows it, but like all of those things, if they're out of whack, can trigger an autoimmune
Correct.
issue.
Yeah.
Like,
In fact, most autoimmune, you won't ever hear this in mainstream medical. Most autoimmune conditions are 1000% rooted in the gut. Your gut health, the integrity of how you cope with stress, your sleep, all of the questions you just asked me, and I don't believe so. No. I think
why would they?
Right.
That's not in their.
Right.
That's not in their schooling.
That's not how they're trained.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
if they're not seeking out the alternatives, how would they know?
Yes.
Mm.
So I thought there has to be a better way for this to. There has to be a better way.
Yeah.
Than
So
what's currently happening.
Yep.
So I said no, thank you, and I left, and I never went back. And I radically changed my diet. I went 1000% on the spectrum of like crazy. I went completely vegan. I decided to cut out like every inflammatory food that I could think of. And I was vegan for probably like 4 or 5 years. And then just got to a point where intuitively I was like, this doesn't feel like it's nourishing me how I need to be nourished. So, again, changed up my diet a little bit. So I changed my diet. I had been practicing yoga. I've been practicing yoga since high school, but I really became committed to my practice, which also has that, benefit of mindfulness and meditation. And got really serious about what alternative routes can I do to kind of like heal the symptoms that I'm having that nobody can seem to pinpoint. So I started going to acupuncture, and I think that was the end of the symptoms that I was having.
And how long, autoimmune oftentimes flares up suddenly, but like it's been however many years in the making usually when it happens. How long did it take you to go from walking out of that doctor's office to, okay, like I feel like I'm getting this under control, to like, okay, like one day you wake up and you're like, oh, like these symptoms aren't here anymore.
Yeah.
How long
So
did it take?
I really feel like, so the initial, and we're going way back in the memory banks here, right? So take it with a grain of salt, but I really feel like as I reflect on that whole experience, the initial symptoms were the vision loss, and then accompanied by a fever. So, and then all of the other things that I experienced after that, I really do think were reactions to the medicine that I was on. I had significant joint pain, but that can happen with a steroid taper, right? There was just a whole slew of things that just didn't really make any sense. But when I was able to kind of like get off all of that big pharma, and I'm gonna say it was pretty quick, right? It wasn't, in hindsight, it probably took 6 or 7 months. But in the totality of your lifespan, just a blip on the radar, really.
Yeah. So then you're still, as you healed and did all of that, you're still in the corporate world.
Yes.
And that kind of thing.
To circle back around.
Yeah, you're still in the corporate
Coming back
world.
all the way around, yes. So I had that in my back pocket, into the corporate world. That's when I was like, I want to do something that really I just want to teach yoga, is really what I want to do. I went and did yoga teacher training in 2013. And so I can remember telling my mom, a random Saturday. We were driving around and I'm like, this isn't serving me anymore. I just want to quit and I just want to teach yoga. And my mom's like, maybe you can still stay at your job and teach yoga, which is what I did. So kind of had been tossing about the idea of getting back into teaching yoga. I love yoga. It has saved me from myself countless, more times than I can count on my fingers and my toes. And I love being able to hold space for others, to allow them the opportunity to work out whatever particular stage of being human that they're in, right? And so I rented a space in Nevada, actually just right behind where we live. This gal had a huge house. She had like 5 acres in the middle of town, and she had a gym. So we rented out her gym, and I started really slowly just teaching 2 classes 2 days a week. And I had a pretty loyal following from when I had originally taught in town back in 2014. So I just was like, hey, guess what? I'm teaching again, and classes filled. And got to the point where I could see like how this might actually like be a thing, right? And I really wanted to be on Main Street in Nevada. I love what Main Streets symbolize, right? Like Main Streets just have a feel, especially in Iowa. And I really wanted to teach yoga on Main Street. And again, I manifested. The whole stars aligned. We found a tiny little space on Main Street in a historic hotel in Nevada. Went and looked at the space with my husband, and it was like in dire need of some love, right? But walking through the space, I could see how it would work in my mind's eye, and so we just bit the bullet, we took it. And then I was kind of reflecting on, well, how can I make this full-time? Like, how can I do this full-time? Because I really love everything about this. And that's when I decided to go back to school to become a massage therapist. Back to my days in Decatur County Hospital. There was a nurse that worked there who was a massage therapist. And she worked primarily as a massage therapist, but had the clinical background of her nursing degree. And I always thought that would be the coolest thing ever, right? So that was like when the seed was planted back at Decatur County Hospital. And so that seed finally like grew into a beautiful flower. I graduated from massage therapy going on like two years ago. So then I was like, I think I can probably do this full time, and left my 6-figure job to open up, and work full time at Blue Moon Holistic Wellness. So, people always joke like, I'm gonna open my own business, so I have, because I don't want to work 40 hours a week, and then we end up working 80, 85, 90, yes, for sure. So that's kind of long story long, the trajectory of how we got to Blue Moon Holistic Wellness.
Yeah. So do you remember what it was like handing in that notice that you were quitting your 6-figure job?
I don't remember specifics. I really don't.
I was gonna say, was it relief? Was it anxiety?
Probably
was it excitement?
Probably all of the
above.
feels. Yeah. So one of my really good friends, she was my boss at United, and we had been through a lot together. All of those right sizing, just the journey we had been on together was peaks and valleys, and so I think the hardest part about leaving that was just the friendships that I forged and made, and the salary. That was probably
Golden handcuffs are like a very real thing.
Yes,
and that's,
for sure.
I've heard it said before, and I know I've said it, it's come out of my mouth, that the world's most addictive drug is a monthly paycheck.
Yeah.
Or a bi-weekly paycheck.
Yes.
However often you get paid, like getting off of that drug is one of the hardest.
Well, and I noticed your Rich Dad, Poor Dad, your book over here on the shelf, right? And if you read this book?
I have not. So you're the second person to be sitting there and point out that book.
Who was the first?
She is a nutrition coach.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, and has a couple of rental properties. But she like pointed that book out too. Those books over there, with the exception of maybe like 5 of them, which I will read multiple times, are all ones I haven't read because I typically don't read 2 books. I don't read a book twice. But so that one's on my list of.
It's a good book. When you read it, Mr. Kawasaki will talk to just exactly what you said. How we trade our time and our dreams for the security of a paycheck, which is an illusion.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot. I'm pretty familiar with his whole thing.
Yeah,
that's why I haven't read it yet. Because I've heard him on multiple podcasts and things like that, so I get the gist of what he's about. I know he probably lays out the system in Rich Dad Poor Dad, but I think it's one of those things that people overlook of just how like addicting that is, just how addicted to that security you are. And I always tell people too, like, not everyone is meant for entrepreneurship.
Right.
Everyone's cut out for it. Like, I think that you can learn the skills to become it if that's like what you really want to do. But at the end of the day, it's not for everybody, and it can't be for everybody, because at the end of the day, like, entrepreneurs that build something really big need people to work within, that big thing that they're building. Totally fine. Like, there is no knock on that. From me, it's just, I appreciate the courage that it took, I suppose, to just walk away from that 6-figure situation and be like, you know what, we're gonna see what happens.
And and that's really what it was. I definitely, the salary was great, and the impact, like being of service to others, was, that's what keeps us all. I mean, as long as you're in service to others, you really can't go wrong, right? You're always going to be supported and taken care of.
Right. And so then, do you remember your first paying customer post quitting your 6-figure job?
So, oh gosh. Well, I remember when we decided that, okay, well, now it's probably time for us to get a little bit more serious about this whole business thing. And it's funny that you speak to entrepreneurship, because for the majority of my life, when I would hear the word entrepreneur, this word would sit on like a pedestal for me, right? And I would just like, oh, someday, like never, that would never be me, right? Like I just don't have what it takes. So when we left United, and it was like, okay, now things really have to kind of gotta get serious. I was working weekend package. I actually went back to the floor as a nurse when COVID hit. So, like any sane human, I decided to go to the floor in the middle, at the start of a pandemic. So I still had the weekend package pay that was coming in, but we knew that we really needed to get serious, and that's when we officially got like an LLC for Blue Moon, and we set up a bank account. All of those things I remember really with great with a rich memory, I guess, because it was kind of like, oh, these are big girl steps.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that my first paying customer, my books filled so quickly for massage, which I believe is a rarity, for your books to be as instantly booked as I was. But I'd been in Nevada for a while, was really active in the community, through the hospital, our kids go to school. So I think it's easier when you have a community that really rallies around you and supports you. So I can't remember who my first paying customer was, but I can remember the whole like getting an LLC and the bank account and all of that.
Yeah, because then it felt,
stuff.
I'd say it felt more real when you did that. It wasn't like you were messing around kind of a deal. So you get into this little bitty space on this main street in Nevada, and I know exactly which hotel you're talking about. It's super cool building, like very cool from the outside, very historic. Used to be like a clock shop in it, right?
So so on the first floor of this historic hotel, so this big commercial property, the first floor is all commercial property. Mm-hmm. So there's 5 businesses. One of them is the clock shop.
Okay, so that's still there. I was gonna say, I seem to remember that from I went to Nevada K through 8th.
Okay.
Long story. That I did not graduate from there. Long story for a different day, perhaps. So I just remember that clock shop's been there forever.
Yeah,
and then
still there.
I remember the front of it though being basically vacant. You know, the rest of the area seemed like it was vacant for a very long time. So you get into this space, you're leasing that space at this point, right?
Yep.
Then you end up moving down towards.
So we're still in the original space. We're still in this teeny tiny. We call it intimate, right?
Yes.
That's like the.
Well, that's the vibe.
It is. You know, it's you. Yeah, and it's so intimate, but perfect. Someday, you know, we have plans too. We have all these plans, right? You get it. When the timing is right and everything falls into place, we'll expand. But for right now, yes, we're on the corner of the historic hotel. And when we went and looked at it, the previous owner did let me know that like, I'd like to sell it, but you know, kind of laissez-faire, not anytime soon. And shortly after we moved in, we found out like, no, he is gonna sell. He's gonna sell really quick, right? And then we're like, well, we just spent a lot of money kind of like redoing this whole space. And it was one of those moments where my husband and I were like, well, if anyone's buy it, like why can't it be us? And so the previous owner took me on a tour, and that was it. That was like a quantum leap moment. And I remember like calling my mom and Andrew all at the same time. You know, you merge the phone calls, and I was like, we are gonna own that building, and we are gonna blah, and I like spit out all of my plans for the space. And I think I was like so passionate about the fact that I just knew it in my bones. I really think we did have a quantum leap moment, and I manifested that building into our reality. So we ended up purchasing that whole building in this January. It was 2 years, so 2 years ago, and time like has flown. That was another inflection point for us, because my husband and I are, you know, this was our first investment property, our first go at like landlords. We were just like so naive, and looking back now, man, would we do things way different. Like, we have learned so much, and it was one of those moments where we were like, we're gonna fucking sink or we're gonna swim, and we don't sink very well. So we got really smart really quickly. We kind of pivoted, and you know, we knew we lacked a bunch of knowledge on all things.
Can you give me an example of like, you're looking back now, you know, 2 years down the road, you go, you know, what the fuck was I thinking?
So yeah.
Can you give me an example of that? You can leave out names if you need to.
I could give you 100. So if we were to go buy a business, because ultimately we purchased a business, it was a commercial.
Yeah, it was cash flowing. I mean, it was a property, but it already had existing leases.
Correct.
It had all of that. Yeah.
So we would need to see books. We got a piece of paper with like monthly expenses, and like my husband and I are like so like honest and transparent. Cool. We're like, oh, this makes sense. Yeah. I mean, cash flows a little bit. And prior to that, like I didn't talk like cash flow. I didn't, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, those are all accounting words, and you were not in the accounting department.
And I actively like pushed all of that stuff away. Right now, I am an open book. I want all of the knowledge, and that's where we've seen the most growth, I think, personally and professionally. So that would be one of the biggest takeaways. We're going to need to see like some QuickBooks.
Yeah.
You know. Right.
Yes, a little more than a piece of paper and your word, essentially.
Yes. Because what we found out, you know, insurance, the policy, I think the previous owner was paying like $500 a year. And we found out that for us, it was going to be some egregious like $550 a month, right?
Right.
And then shortly after we took ownership, there was some political stuff, like the world went crazy, and gas prices like went through the roof, and it's a boiler system. So, you know, we saw some months where our gas bill was like $3,300, right? And so
those are big ouches when you you were not planning for them.
The boiler broke, you know, the
first week.
It was just so crazy. Yeah, there was just my air conditioner, you know, all of the things that go along with owning a property.
Yeah.
So I think that for us, one of the biggest takeaways, like when we buy our next business, is I want some books.
Yeah. Well,
for sure.
that being said, it's one of those deals that you don't, it all works out. It's all a learning curve.
Yeah.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, and when you do know, you do better.
Exactly. And I think there's sometimes I look back and think about, building businesses and renovating buildings and things like that. And I go, I think if I knew what I know now, I don't know if I would have, started on day one if I knew what was coming down. But I think that's probably a better way to reframe it is when you do know, you do better. Yeah. I like that a little better. Less limiting, shall we say, in future endeavors.
Yeah, for sure, right?
Yes. So you get, you end up buying this building. You have some surprise expenses. I got to imagine that the cash flows are maybe not covering those.
Oh, not at all. I think the first time that we cash flowed, it was way after we had bought the building, and it was like $30.
Yeah.
And we celebrated that.
Yeah. Well,
we celebrated cash flowing $30, right?
A win's a win.
And with so the building's 100 years old. So every dollar that gets brought in, what cash flows goes back into the maintenance, repairs.
Yes.
So the first floor is all commercial. The second and third floor is residential. So the potential, we believe, to have what looks like 11 doors. Currently, we have 3 apartments that are finished and being occupied at this time.
Okay.
Yep.
So 3 of 11 are occupied. And were those occupied in the beginning when you bought the property, or?
One was. Okay. So 2 of the 3 were. And so our plan was with that third one, we were going to do an Airbnb. Mm-hmm. And my husband and I are both Geminis. So we're both dreamers. We are just like, we have all of these like plans that are like 1000% limitless. Like they're beautiful. But that would be another learning thing. Like if you are going to have an Airbnb, like you need to have a way to fund, because we wanted an experience. So in order for us to feel like we could have an Airbnb, the hallways needed to be done. And so that was kind of like our first project. Looking back, we went like 6 months with no income coming in because we were trying to get it ready. And looking back, we would have just found the right fit for the apartment, for the space while we worked on the hallways, right? To kind of like fund the work that we were doing. But those things you don't know till sometimes you learn the hard way. So the goal is we would love to restore it back to making it modern, relevant, but still paying homage to the history of the space. Mm-hmm. So I would love a mixture of long-term, mid-term, and short-term rentals in there. Kind of like still a hotel, but just varying lengths of stay. Yeah. So if you know of any silent investors or angel investors who really, really want to be a part of something great, send them my way.
Yeah, somebody with a real estate bend, I think would be a good fit for you guys. Yeah. But old buildings can get incredibly expensive incredibly quickly.
So you know this.
I very personally know this. And it's one of those things that you get into renovations, we were talking about it before we got on the podcast, of nothing's level, nothing's square. They don't build things like they used to. Right. And because of that, some of the new modern conveniences are a little more difficult. Things can be worked around. I love what you're saying of like making it modern, but essentially leaving the character is the way that I would describe it. That's definitely what we tried to do with ours here.
You nailed it. Yeah.
Thank you. It's like I told you, it's not done. It's never going to be done, and that's okay. But I think that there is a growing trend of that, it seems like, and maybe it's just the circles that I run in and the people that I'm attracting. But it seems like there's a lot, like the resurgence of like thrifting and, taking old things and refinishing them. And I think it's really cool to be able to blend that old character, but have it modern and functional. Because at the end of the day, if you're going to end up doing it in some sort of like short-term rental or something like that, it has to have all the modern conveniences.
Sure does.
Like, it's fine if it looks cool and it looks historic, but if it like doesn't have air conditioning and Wi-Fi, like...
Correct.
It's just that you're limiting your potential from an economic standpoint, which as a business owner and a building owner,
That's very important.
Cash flow is king
Yes.
at the end of the day, whether people like it or not. It just is what it is. Okay, so when you bought the building, how many businesses were in it? You guys were in it?
Yep, so
and
5 total.
5, so they all 5 were occupied when you bought it?
Correct.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
And we, shortly, so there's 5 total. So of the 5 that are there, there's 3 of us that have stayed. So there was a little bit of like, we call it like a cleansing, if you will, right? Like we had a couple tenants who we absolutely adore both of the tenants. One, she was able to buy her own building. So we really celebrated that. More in the loss of her leaving, but
awesome.
Totally celebrated the fact that she was going to be a business owner, like a building owner, right? And then there was another tenant who needed something bigger. They were growing, which is, again is
great, good problem to have.
1000%. And so, we're like, oh, what are we gonna do? Like, this is crazy. And they moved out at the same time, and it was right around the time that we found out we were expecting twins. So, the universe always has a beautiful way of like everything happening all at once or nothing happening,
of course,
at all. But we're kind of weathered humans, and we're like, well, everything is happening for our highest and greatest good, and nothing could be more truer. So the 2 tenants that took their spots really align with the vision that we had for the building. Andrew and I had always said like we would love to see like a deli or some sort of like bakery or whatever, an eating establishment in there. And then obviously you spoke to it earlier about attracting your kind of people, being on the holistic ends of things. Like I would love to have, I would love to see a whole bunch of healers in that space. And so not only did we write that plan down and kind of put it out in the universe, but when those 2 tenants left, we ended up getting a deli shop, like sweet and savory, right? Yes, yeah. They moved in, and it's so funny. Andrew and I tease, like literally we're paying them to be there because they pay rent, but like we love everything that they sell. So we end up pretty much paying them at the end of the month to be there. And then there's Katie Britton. She's a nurse practitioner. She took the other tenant spot. She's got like an integrative medical practice going on in the back, and really excited to have her in the space as well.
Yeah, she graduated with my brother.
Okay,
so,
yeah,
yes.
Small world.
Yes. And I did see she's about a month in, I think now she's had her doors open. It's not been very long.
Yeah, no, I don't even think it's been quite a month. I think her first day was like January 3rd.
Okay, I was gonna say it seems like it's really, really new. But yeah, that seems like a really good fit with the whole cohort you have going on right now. Okay, so you find out that you are expecting twins.
Yeah, wild.
At that point, were you just like, oh shit, what did we get ourselves into?
Oh heavens. Well, so Andrew and I, we had babies really young, so we always tease that we're old, but in the totality of like the whole lifespan, we're not super old, but we didn't plan on having babies, like 1 baby, let alone 2, at this stage in our life.
Because at that point your youngest was
10.
Okay.
When we found out. So she's 11 now. And so we had like 8 years till we were empty nesters, and we had all of these plans. We're going to finally travel and solo, that is.
RV life.
Yeah.
RV or van life sort of a situation.
Yeah, definitely. Like we were really excited for that. And, obviously these 2 little souls were meant for us. They picked us. So, it was definitely kind of like, what the hell are we going to do now? Like we have built this life, and this life doesn't, like how the hell are 2 newborn babies going to
fit in all of this?
In all of this. We're running two businesses. My husband still works full time. we have 3 girls who are in activity. You know what I mean? You're just
Right. And you're homeschooling those 3 girls at this point.
so
too?
no. So
Okay.
that's new this year.
Okay.
Yeah. So our
As if
2.
you needed something else to do.
So I had always like felt it in my heart to homeschool, like take it back way back when we found out we were first pregnant with Lily. I always thought it would be really special to homeschool through like elementary and then send them off for middle school and high school. But you know, in pure Meagan and Andrew fashion, we do shit backwards. And our first youngest, Finley, had wanted to be homeschooled for, she's been begging for like the last 4 or 5 years. And, you know, it was always something like, oh, maybe next year we'll look at it. Maybe next year. And when we found out we were having twins, that's when we were like, well,
we'll take the extra hands at
I
home.
mean, that has actually proved to be really helpful, but we knew that we weren't going to pay someone else to raise our babies. One, we maybe would have continued on the trajectory that we were at, but 2, it just doesn't make sense. Like I would literally be working to pay some other human to nurture my human's minds, to, to instill values. And that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So we had already pretty early on, we found out at 20 weeks. So halfway through the pregnancy, we were like, okay, well, we're going to have to I'll work at the business nights and weekends because he works, primarily during the day. I'll work around his schedule. And that's when Finley was like, well, if you're going to be home during the day, I'm going to homeschool. And it was that was the scariest decision. Out of all of the decisions that we've had to make in the last 6 or 7 months, that was definitely the hardest. I didn't feel like super equipped, which I guess looking back now, as a product of the public school system, if I don't feel like I have the skills and the knowledge to homeschool my children, then maybe there's something broken within the system, right? So we really kind of 2 days before school started, we were like, oh, let's just do it. Fine. So the hardest part was sending an email, okay, this is what we're doing with Finley. And it was so hard because, you're worried about what people think, you're worried about, are you making the right decision for your child? Ultimately, at the end of the day, nobody cares more about my children's education
than
me.
Of course not.
So Andrew and I were like, well, we'll just try it for 1 year, and she's in 5th grade. If it doesn't work out, then it'll be fine. She'll just go back to 6th grade and it'll be okay. So again, got really quick, really smart really quickly on all of the things homeschool, and still learning, everything's you never fully arrive in any venture in life. So every day is still learning something new, about homeschool, about us, the dynamics of the relationship. So yeah, Finley is the only one being homeschooled.
Okay.
Currently. Yeah.
But so far so good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
No regrets on that one at all.
There are days where I'm like, what the hell did we do?
Sure.
but that's just with anything.
I was gonna say there's days in public school,
Yeah.
with your kids going to school.
She's 11 going on, 27, I feel like some days. And I have noticed that the more that she's around me, the more that she takes on my characteristics. So there's some days the sass is just really present. Yeah. And so it's kind of like a beautiful mirror for me to look inward and, okay, so I see her being super sassy and super assertive and kind of like a, very loving human, but also doesn't mince words. She's not, I'm like, okay, well, maybe that's an opportunity for me to soften certain edges, right? So she's a great mirror.
Yes, I was gonna say mirror was exactly the word that I have heard, not having children myself, but I've heard that children are just a heck of a mirror for a lot of things. So cool. So what's life been like adapting to having twins? They're 5 months old now, is that what you said?
Just turned 5 months last week. They are the most amazing. The 2 questions that we get asked the most: do you sleep? And are they good babies? And I think those are two really silly questions. Like, I think people just do that out of the goodness of the heart. No, we're not sleeping. Like, we sleep sometimes. We've got 2 newborns, you know, or infants now. And I don't think any baby is a bad baby, right?
Yeah.
Like,
they're just babies.
They're just babies. And
they're learning how to world.
Yeah, and this world is like a wild place to be alive in, and they're much more conscious than I think people tend to give them credit for. And so the interesting thing about kind of like starting over essentially is Andrew and I have 16 years worth of wisdom. And we know just truly how fast time goes. Like, I can remember bringing Lily home from the hospital, and now she, you know, she graduates next year, right? And it happens so quick, and you hear everyone say it, but when you live it and experience it, it really shifts your perspective. This time around, sleepless nights, my husband and I are like, it's our quality time together. Like, we can have a conversation in bed at 3 a.m. and not get interrupted, right? And we've used our time wisely. If we're up at 3, that's usually when we start working. Yeah. Or we several times a week, we do meditations together. You know, we just really have kind of found that weird all hours of the night, kind of like where we connect.
Yeah. Well, because you've been through it. You know, you've been through it 3 times. You've gone through it. You knew, like...
Those sleepless nights, they don't last.
Oh, that's what, yes.
Yeah, this is like the shortest time period ever. So I really feel like having that wisdom that we truly have is like gold. So being able to be with them, to nurture them, to grow them, to see all of their firsts, you know, is something, looking back, like I wish we would have been able to do that the first 3.
So that was going to be my next question. And so, like, your first 3, then you were probably sending them to daycare then?
Yeah.
Because you were both working full time.
Luckily, my mom is a small business owner, so we kind of come from a long line of entrepreneurs, and so she owned a daycare. So the first 3 went to my mom. So yeah, so grateful for that, right? Like,
that's lucky.
Yeah, very lucky. So yeah, sent him to daycare and then public school. Okay. Yeah.
So then, and you don't have to share about this if you don't want, but so then were your first 3 hospital births, and then
so the first, so with all 5 babies, I had them all natural, but the first 3 were in the hospital. The first 2 were pretty highly medicalized. And this is a whole podcast. I would love to be on a natural birthing podcast someday to share my experience. But the first 2 were very like intervention heavy. And you know, with my first daughter, I had never experienced birth before. I didn't know how to really advocate for myself. So didn't have an epidural or anything like that, but I wasn't progressing fast enough. So, you know, they're like, well, we have a medicine for that. It's called Pitocin, which, you know, has a whole slew of side effects, namely contractions come stronger and faster and harder. So learned a lot with Lily, and then with Olivia, she came shortly after that. So less interventions with Olivia, but still we were induced. They ran Pitocin, and then, you know, that whole...
Finley was post autoimmune flare up. So you were already on a path.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, and this is it, truthfully back in like 2007, you know, we take for granted as we sit here in 2024, how much information we have and how easy it is to access
at our fingertips.
Yes. About, you're talking about, you know, natural birth, like natural birthing podcast, like that information back in 2007, unless you had been tipped off to it for some reason and were going and buying books about it, like there was no way for you to get
and it's not something that was I didn't even know was an option,
right? Because it's again, this is like no knock on you, but you were down the nursing path, you were down the traditional medical path, like
programmed into a system
that you were given the information you were given, and there's no reason, you know, at this point, you know, like you said, talking about doctors, you think you're going to go to them and they're going to fix you or send you down. Like, this is, yeah, with thousands of years of experience of having babies not in hospitals kind of thing.
Correct.
So in your defense, like on all of this, anybody in that situation would have been the same. But then you got lucky sort of going down the path of figuring out that, oh, maybe
we can do things a little bit differently.
Or maybe they don't know everything, sort of
and,
situation.
And I believe, this isn't a knock. We have some really wonderful medical professionals in Story County, namely, but, as a general rule, I think that they take an oath, right? And that's really to do no harm. But they're still trained in a particular set of medicine, and that's just that's the truth. That's just what it is, and it doesn't have all of the, it doesn't have all of the alternative aspects that can really complement the work that they do. And it's not an all or nothing approach, right? No. Like, you have to have a little bit of everything. So we had a midwife with Finley, still hospital-based birth, still like, a beautiful experience. It was probably my best birth that up until that point. But still, my water was broke. Like, I had gone in for an appointment and she's like, you're 7.5 centimeters dilated. Like, you need to get to the hospital now, right? And so and again, being a nurse, I just didn't think I would ever have a baby unless they broke my water, like artificially ruptured, the membranes, because that's what I had lived. So I was really skeptical, with the twins, like, am I actually gonna go into labor? Like, I've never not had my water broke. So we had decided before we knew we were having twins that we would like to at least pursue a home birth. Like, what would that look like? And then, we found out we were having twins, and
complicated.
Yeah, definitely. And with my age, like, I was listed as high risk because I'm geriatric,
right?
Advanced maternal age,
which anything over, if people don't know, anything over 35
correct,
is geriatric.
Yeah, isn't that a lovely term?
As I sit here at 33, childless, going, guess we'll probably be in for a geriatric pregnancy or two, but whatever.
So when we went in for the ultrasound, we had met with a fraternal specialist. They call him an MFM, maternal fetal specialist, and he had said, we had pretty frank conversation. I was very nervous about that appointment because I knew that I had desires to go the home birth route, but I also knew that that's not well respected in the medical community whatsoever. And so I was like all worked up about this conversation that I was going to have with this provider, and he ended up being a lovely enough guy. He basically said, like, your desire to have a home birth probably won't happen. And I pushed back and I said, and why is that? Like, why is that? And, he gave me all of the things that he's supposed to say. And I said, well, I appreciate your perspective. I guess I'll work through that with my midwife. And he said, we're on complete opposite ends of the spectrum. He's like, you're really crunchy and I practice in an environment where I have to be on the opposite end of the spectrum. He's like, I appreciate where you're at, but this is where I'm at. And I reminded him that that's where he chooses to practice.
Yeah.
Because he could go anywhere, right? So yeah, ultimately we were able to have a home birth naturally with the twins.
And they were born on different days.
Yeah, different days.
Which is wild.
Yeah, so Briggs was born before midnight, and then Sawyer came 44 minutes later after midnight. So different birthdays. Which really speaks to, she's pretty spicy. She's pretty. She
does things on her own terms.
She really does.
She does not care.
Yeah.
Does not care what your terms are. That's pretty cool though. That's one of those, like you said, you could do an entire podcast on childbirth and natural childbirth and the systems that have ended up the way they are,
and really, so we, as women, you think of the last movie that you watched where it had a woman giving birth, right? And I don't care what movie it is, but she's always like retching in pain, screaming, it's, the scene is chaotic. And that's what we're programmed to believe birth is like.
Yeah. Or what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, that's like, I didn't know anything different, right? The only reason that I chose not to have an epidural was the first, and I always knew it was available to me. My mom didn't have an epidural back in the days when that wasn't really
Didn't have
a
them,
thing.
yeah.
So I knew it could be done, and we kind of like emulate, nature versus nurture. So I just didn't get one the first time because my mom didn't. So had my mom had gotten, my story may have been completely different, but I think that's the biggest. It was so empowering for me to be able to bring these two souls into this earth in such peace. My mom was there. Our three daughters were there. My dad was upstairs, and the lights were dim, and really like they were born free of any intervention.
Yeah.
Which was beautiful. Not for everybody, but it was the exact birth that we had desired. And I worked really hard the whole pregnancy
to make it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important to talk about the alternatives. What can be done. I can tell you that I will probably have all of our children in the hospital because I have a highly anxious husband. I would not have it any other way. He would literally be terrified that something was going to happen if I'm not in that. We'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and it's appropriate to talk about on a podcast such as this because, like, this is a podcast on, like, building, right?
Yeah.
And so you can be a mama of 5 and still be building an empire, right? Like, you can do both.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about that because that is, I have had a string of guests that are mompreneurs, and as something that I aspire to be, because that's one of those things we will expand our family in the relatively near future. How do you think about that balance of building your business, getting into all of these crazy adventures that you maybe don't have all the information going into, and just kind of figuring out as you go? Like, how do you think about balance now with 2 infant twins and 3 older kids? Is balance possible, and is it just going to look different in every season?
1,000% it will look different in every season. In some seasons you will be able to say yes more often, and other seasons it will, like, shit will shift, and no is a word that you're going to have to be okay saying. Oh gosh, I think it was a month before we found out we were pregnant, I received the great honor of getting Entrepreneur of the Year for Nevada, right? And so
congratulations.
Oh got a really beautiful plaque. Like, it was an honor to be able to be nominated. And that same week we had won Yoga Studio of the Year. So, like, things were really, like, there was a lot of momentum, there was a lot of energy. I had all of these great big plans on what I was going to build for Blue Moon, but my plans, obviously, the timing, just because I found out we were pregnant shortly thereafter. And a good friend texted me the other day, and she follows me on social media, and she had said, I am really enjoying, like, your posts. She used to be a stay-at-home mom. Her kids are a little older, so now she's back into the workforce, of the slower paced lifestyle. I miss those days. And her intentions were so pure, and if she watches this, I want her to know that, like, I know that she came from a really good place, but from somebody, me, who has always equated, to a certain extent, my worth based on how productive I was, right? So they were tied together. I grew up in a house that really didn't value rest, you know what I mean? Like, there was always something to do. And so instantly I was like, well, it's slow. Like, I'm homeschooling, I'm running 2 businesses, I have 3, I'm like, I wouldn't say that my lifestyle is slow whatsoever, but what I think she was referencing is the shift in my priorities. And so they really have, in this season that I'm in, have shifted, and my role right now is to nurture, like, the family, and I'm able to do that and still be present at Blue Moon, the yoga studio, the massage, just not as much. So working nights and weekends, like, complete opposite hours that I was normally working, but still being able to be present to serve. So it's totally possible. It's just you have to be okay really bending and allowing the fluidity of the plants to just organically shape.
Yeah.
And pivoting when necessary. And I'm thankful that, got such a loyal group of humans who really believe in what we're doing at Blue Moon, that have just really kind of like buckled up and stuck around for the ride, right?
Yeah, which is, I think that's an important piece, to figure out that support, that community, and build it. I don't want to say build yourself out of the business, but in some ways you kind of have to.
In this season of
right.
life, right? Like
yes.
I was working 55 hours before I had the twins. That's just not where I'm at right now. You know? So that means that my availability at the studio, especially for Reiki and massage, is not what it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and being okay and sitting with people's potential disappointment.
Yeah.
Or even that coming out of my mouth, I don't know necessarily that it will disappoint people if you have to step back and you can't take as many appointments and you can't do all the things. It's more, I feel like, the fear of disappointing.
You're right.
them.
You're 1,000% right. And for the people who who aren't okay with my decision to pour more into my family life than my business life at this point, they're gonna find what they need elsewhere, and that's okay.
Well, also at the end of the day, are you living for them or are you living for you?
I think for all of the mom, what do you call them? Mompreneur. For all of those out there, those aspiring, like, the business has to serve you. Mm-hmm. In order for you to be able to serve the business, it does have to serve you, and that I think is something that takes people really long time to be okay with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't know, again, running theme with this, I don't know if you ever fully arrive with being okay with it. I think there's always, and maybe that's just me, I think there'll always be that little inkling, but it's a season.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's one thing to say, like, oh, the business is gonna serve me, but to really embody that, to live it, and to be okay with it. Yeah. That just is a day by day kind of mindset shift. Yeah.
So then, what are you most excited for in the next 12 months?
Oh my gosh. Oh, and now this is where the Gemini, I must pick one thing. I really think it's funny that you use the word excited, because I don't know how many times I have told my husband, like, I'm just really excited about, like, what this next year is going to bring. Probably no less than 8 times in the last month. Like, I'm just really excited, intuitively, energetically. I'm just feeling. And what am I excited for? I have no idea. I'm just open to receive. I definitely, I think I can see some things coming into fruition for us, professionally, personally, but we'll see. The plans that I have for myself are not nearly as good or beautiful as the plans that the Creator and the universe has for me and my family. So I definitely have a lot of excitement about this year, but I'm just open to receive, right?
Right.
It's a vibe. Yeah. So I answered your question without really answering your question, but I am genuinely excited about what's in store for us, because I think we've kind of been in for a while there, it was really chaotic from the time we found out we were pregnant. I was really actually very sick. I had hyperemesis gravidarum the first several months of the pregnancy, so things were super chaotic, and then that got better. And so I feel like, we kind of had a season of, like, a lot of unknowns, a lot
turbulence.
That's a very good word. And so the seas are a little bit smoother sailing right now. So really excited to see what's on the horizon for us.
Awesome. Very good. Well, is there anything else that you want to leave people with?
Oh my gosh. Oh, yes, probably a whole handful of things. But I think my husband said something earlier today in passing. We've just seen each other in passing today, especially. And he had said, if you find yourself in the service of others, you're gonna be okay. He gave a talk at the high school to a bunch of young kids about, the decision to go to college, to not go to college. What does that look like? And really the idea of a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset, and how can you align more with the ideas around how do you embody more of a limitless kind of mindset shift as opposed to the lack and limitation. And really, he said, if you find yourself in the service of others and you do it to the best of your ability with a heart-centered attitude, you're going to be just fine. And so I think that's really appropriate for this podcast, for all of your listeners, your entrepreneurs, really small businesses, and those who are building their empires, are often in the service of others. So I think that's probably a really beautiful way to end our time together.
Yeah.
And thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for allowing me to be in your beautiful space and to have a conversation. It's been a lovely time. So thank you.
Been amazing. So one last thing though, where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me. A quick Google search of Blue Moon Holistic Wellness will direct you to our Instagram page, our Facebook page. My number is all over the interwebs, so you can contact me, text. I'm not great at phone calls because during the day things are
Got
busy.
a few things going on.
Yeah, so email bluemoonholisticwellness@gmail.com. You can find out more about our yoga classes, the services that we offer, Reiki, massage at www.bluemoonholisticwellness.com. We like to hold monthly healing events. We have some free classes every month. So that's really where you can find more information.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for
Oh my
sitting
gosh.
down
Yes,
and
thank
sharing
you.
your story today. I really appreciate it.
Yes, no, thank you.
All right, catch you guys next time.